It was a scorching afternoon in a small village tucked away in the heart of Africa. The air was thick with dust, and the sun hung high above, casting a harsh, unforgiving light over the weathered streets. Amidst the bustle of the market, an elderly woman named Momatiti stood behind her makeshift stall, offering fresh fruits and vegetables to the villagers. Her hands, callous from years of hard labor, shook slightly as she arranged her goods. Momatiti had lived a life full of struggle and sacrifice. A widow for many years, she had no family left, except for the memories of her late husband and a small plot of land she could barely cultivate. Her life was simple, but it was one of quiet dignity. She woke up at dawn each day to prepare her stall and sold what little produce she could grow to support herself. Despite her modest earnings, there was a deep generosity in her heart. One morning, as Momatiti was setting up her stall, a young boy approached her. His clothes were ragged, his face drawn with hunger, and his eyes wide with desperation. He couldn't have been older than 12. His name was Kofi, and he had been wandering the village looking for something to eat. Without a second thought, Momatiti offered him an apple, the last one she had on her stall that day. The boy hesitated, his eyes darting between the fruit and Momatiti, unsure whether to accept or not. "Go ahead, child," Momatiti urged, her voice soft but firm. "It's only one apple, but maybe it will fill your stomach." The boy took the fruit, his hands trembling as he bit into it. It was the first meal he had in days. He thanked her repeatedly, but Momatiti only smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet joy. She knew what it was like to go without. She understood hunger, but she also knew that kindness, no matter how small, could make all the difference. That afternoon, as Kofi left, he turned back to Momatiti with tears in his eyes. "One day, I will repay you," he said earnestly, and with that, he disappeared into the crowd. Momatiti didn't expect anything in return. She had seen many children come and go, and all she could do was offer what she had, even if it wasn't much. But Momatiti had one thing that many didn't: savings. Every day, after selling her produce, she would tuck away a small portion of the meager earnings into an old tin box under her bed. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give her some security in her old age. Little did she know that the boy she had just helped would return to her life in a way she could never have imagined. The seasons passed, and Kofi's visits to Momatiti's stall became more frequent. Though he never asked for anything more, Momatiti continued to offer him small kindnesses, food, advice, and a few coins here and there. As time went on, the boy began to grow, both in stature and in character. He became more self-sufficient, helping others in the village and working diligently to improve his own life. One day, as Momatiti was walking home from the market, a familiar face appeared before her. Kofi, now a young man, stood tall, his once skinny frame now filled out with muscle and strength. His clothes were better, his eyes brighter. He had changed, and so had his future. "Thank you for everything, Momatiti," Kofi said, his voice rich with emotion. "You saved me when no one else would. But now, I need to repay you." And with those words, the story of their bond began to shift, taking a turn that would change both of their lives forever. Years had passed since that fateful day when Kofi had first met Momatiti. The village, though small, had seen much change in that time. New roads were carved through the land, and new faces appeared in the marketplace, but one thing remained constant: Momatiti's stall, with its familiar scent of fresh produce and the comforting sight of her gentle smile. She had weathered the storms of life, her hands and heart worn from a lifetime of sacrifice, but still, she stood. Kofi, on the other hand, had left the village in search of a better life. He had worked tirelessly in the city, picking up odd jobs and, over time, learning the trade of carpentry. He saved every penny he earned, driven by a promise he made to himself to never forget the woman who had given him food when he had nothing and hope when his world seemed bleak. One day, a letter arrived at Momatiti's door. It was from Kofi. The letter, though simple, carried weight in its words. "I have returned," it read, "and I wish to see you. I owe you more than you know." Momatiti's heart fluttered with a strange mix of joy and apprehension. She hadn't seen Kofi in years. She had heard rumors that he had made something of himself, but she never imagined that he would return to her in this way. What could he possibly want from her now? The next afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent behind the hills, Momatiti's heart skipped a beat as a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the market. Kofi stood there, now a man in his 20s, strong and capable, dressed in fine clothes. He had the air of someone who had worked hard to get to where he was. But more than that, there was a quiet reverence in his eyes as he approached her stall. "Momatiti," Kofi said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's been too long." Momatiti looked up from her basket of fruits, her old eyes squinting in the fading light. She had to steady herself as the years seemed to melt away in that moment. The child she had once fed had become a man who had returned to repay her kindness. She took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing upon her. "Kofi, my boy," she said softly, her voice trembling with the mixture of time and memories. "I never expected you to come back." Kofi sat down beside her, looking down at her hands, which had grown frail and thin with age. "I didn't come back for myself, Momatiti. I came because I owe you everything." Momatiti shook her head, her wrinkled face creased in a soft smile. "You owe me nothing, child. You took my food when you had nothing, yes. But you gave me hope in return. That's all I ever needed." Kofi paused, then leaned forward, his eyes glistening with sincerity. "I know you don't want anything from me, Momatiti. But please, let me help you now. You've worked hard your whole life. Let me give you some rest." Momatiti's heart ached. She had always done everything herself, never asking for help, never expecting anything in return. But here was this young man, who had once been hungry and lost, offering to take care of her. She was hesitant, but there was something about his sincerity that touched her deeply. Kofi had come a long way, but he still remembered the way Momatiti had treated him, the kindness she had shown him when no one else would. She had given him the most precious thing a person could offer, compassion. And now, he was determined to return that kindness, to show her that her faith in him had not been misplaced. But as Momatiti looked at Kofi, her thoughts swirled. He had built a life for himself, but the life he had chosen was filled with responsibilities and the burdens of success. She didn't want to be a burden. The last thing she wanted was for Kofi to feel obligated to help her. Yet, she couldn't deny that a part of her longed for someone to care for her in the way she had cared for others all her life. "Maybe," she whispered, "maybe I've earned a little rest after all." Kofi smiled, knowing that her acceptance of help was a monumental shift. It was the first time she had ever allowed someone to care for her in the way he now intended to. What neither of them knew at the time was that this simple moment, this decision to trust one another, would set in motion a chain of events neither could have foreseen. Life, as always, had a way of throwing unexpected twists in their path, and the future, as it often does, had its own plans for Momatiti and Kofi. Time passed swiftly, as it always does when change comes in small, steady increments. Kofi's presence in Momatiti's life was a gentle reminder that kindness had a way of coming full circle. Each day, he helped her with small tasks, tending to her stall, making sure she had enough to eat, and taking her to the market when the weight of her years became too much to bear. Though Momatiti never asked for much, there was a certain comfort in knowing that someone cared for her well-being, that someone saw her as more than just the frail widow she had become. Kofi's devotion to her was not out of obligation, but out of gratitude, a deep respect for the woman who had given him everything when he had nothing. But as the seasons changed, so did the winds of fate. The village, once calm and peaceful, began to experience strange occurrences. First, it was the cattle. Several herds had gone missing overnight. Then, the crops began to wilt prematurely, as though the earth itself had turned against the villagers. Whispers of misfortune spread like wildfire, and soon the village was gripped with fear. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie orange glow across the land, Kofi returned from the village square with a troubled look on his face. The people had been speaking of strange happenings, of dark figures seen lurking at the edges of the village, and the eerie sounds that echoed through the trees at night. It seemed as though something malevolent had taken hold of the land. Mama Titi, ever wise despite her years, listened intently as Kofi spoke. She could feel the shift in the air, the growing unease that seemed to permeate the very ground they walked on. Her heart, though full of love for the young men who had returned to her, could not ignore the dark turn that seemed to be looming. "Kofi," she said, her voice low and steady, "there are times in life when we are tested, not by the things we can see, but by the things we cannot. I've lived a long time, child, and I've seen much. But this feels different." Kofi nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "I don't know what's happening, Mama Titi. But I feel something is wrong, something that goes beyond mere bad luck or coincidence." The two of them sat in silence as the sounds of the village's distant murmurs grew softer in the cool evening air. It was then that Kofi noticed something he hadn't before, a faint glow on the horizon, beyond the fields where the villagers had once gathered. It wasn't the warm light of a campfire or the soft glow of a lantern, it was something far more ominous, a cold, unnatural light that flickered and swayed like a living thing.